Broadcasting basically live from the Scarlet Mansion, it's your boy, a Demon Girl! And today, we're going to analyze the new Darkness Within banner. So cliche! Now, I would have probably skipped this banner if it wasn't for the fact that I'm a huge fan of mind control and corruption. And of course, of Berkut. That being said, I actually predicted Berkut's re-arrival with my psychic powers merely hours before his release. Now, allow me to show you proof of my psychic abilities. Ha! And now, I have larger breasts! See, this is real power! And now, let us begin the analyzing! Okay, so this banner is about, hey, tons of new stats, tons of new skills. We're now head first into, knees deep into the territories of power creep. Now, I know people are like, that Lu Bu, all he talks about is power creep. Oh, power creep. Well, you know what? You know what? How can you say otherwise when you're presented with, like, this? You look at this core and you're like, oh, hey, what would you give the 173 BST? What the hell are they thinking? This is stats that a Season 2 armor unit has. Season 1 armor units have long been surpassed, but now an infantry unit has that as their stats. Colorless as well. Of course, I guess they somehow managed to balance it by spreading the stats evenly, but I guess we can go talking about that once we cover our pal Corrin. So, let's start by talking about our pal Marita. And yes, I'm kind of just doing this impromptu. No scripts or anything, but I guess I can talk about it at the end. So, Marita, if you're anything like me, you have no idea who the hell she is. That's a perfectly normal thing. I looked her up, and I saw, 776. Yeah, only like 5 people play that game, so it's a little unfortunate. I intend to do it at some point, but I don't have the time, as you know. Later. I hope I can try it out. But anyway, so Marita is the basic Myrmidon archetype. Now, her stats is pretty high. We're looking at 41 speed that goes up to 45 through a super boon in speed. I know, it's so tiresome right now. Even like boons and banes, assets and flaws. Yes, even those are being optimized right now, so it's really disgusting the way the game has developed when into these things. I know, I'm complaining about it again. I'm so sorry, but it's just, I can't help it. How can I? This is like, your units from before, they don't even like really match up to the units of today. And Marita is a perfectly good example of that. She puts quite a few other sword units to shame. Ayra, we were talking about like, oh man, Ayra is so evil, everything's wrong in this world, and then we have like, Carla who appeared, and Carla is even faster, even stronger, and well, now we have Marita. I have no idea what next year's Myrmidon's gonna be. They probably will reach 50 speed like naturally. It's absolutely deplorable. But besides speed though, luckily they do follow the archetype and have middling defenses and weak resistance. So thankfully Marita is kind of a sitting duck if she gets attacked on the enemy phase. Now, that being said, her player phase is no slouch whatsoever. Now we will see why by going in to look at her skills. So her Shadow Sword is... Once again, most Myrmidons enjoy accelerating their special triggers, so they crit quite a bit. And her HP, so think Forsetti. And she initiates combat. She can make a follow-up attack before foes can counterattack. So she's all about overpowering the enemy in speed and then quickly striking them down before they can do anything to counterattack them. This is a terrible, terrible weapon. It is so terrible, and I mean terrible as in terribly good. Because, alright, you can slap on Desperation on a B slot, and all of a sudden, what the You're constantly destroying people before they can do anything against you. Before, desperation is balanced by the fact that, oh, you need to get hurt a little bit before you can actually use it to run someone over. But now, we're in a stage of the game that you don't even have to do that anymore. So that's Shadow Sword, gentlemen! Shadow Sword! And now you also look at the new Flashing Blade 4. See this fancy little exclamation mark? It's a new skill! Well, I have to say it like this. Flashing Blade and Heavy Blade does needed a little bit of buff. This is actually the kind of power people I don't mind so much, because they do kind of need it. You think about it. I mean, like, you have much better skills that gives much higher stats. So, now, instead, they're going to try to benefit you a little bit for using Flashing Blade by making you do 5 damage per unit's attack. Well, I don't know, it might have been a bit much. I think they could have toned down, and it's not attractive enough as an A slot. I understand that. A slot is a very competitive slot. So right now, they decide to go and give Flashing Blade 5 damage per unit's attack. 5 true damage. So this is actually a really, really good setup. Now, I think the best units to use Flashing Blade, I mean, she's really good for it. Don't get me wrong. She's absolutely insane. The fact that she will always strike twice, she will do 10 damage on top of whatever she's going to do. Just like that. All thanks to this broken setup of Shadow Sword. But I think that there are other units that can really benefit from it as well, such as DC units, distant counter units, or, well, you know, unfortunately there's no weapon that has closed counter yet. Soon, maybe, but not quite just yet. Flashing Blade would be really good on those. See, the thing is that it grants special cooldown charge, and it deals 5 damage per unit's attack. But there is one unfortunate problem in which that most of those units that could have distant counter weapons and stuff like that, their speed is not that great. At least comparing to today's standards, it's not that great. But if you were to meet that standard, there's all kinds of funny things that can happen. And you also have to think about it like this, okay? Besides Myrmidons, you have armors that are up there, then you have mages. So, mages are the ones that are kind of fast. You should probably watch out for them, but they're not that hard to deal with. So, in terms of actually needing that 5 damage, you probably use it on, like, tanks or something like that. So you can use this 5 damage as a tank buster for guys like, oh, I don't know, legendary super magic Ike or something like that. If he's faster than that armor, which he normally is, because most armor these days are like, what, 20 or 30 speed, something really snaily and slow, and you can use that to inflict 10 extra damage on top of that, on top of your stupid or like that. I want to say that you can also use this to vantage, to take out someone with, like, okay, alright, I apologize. It's just, I'm so into the evil of Savage Vantage, at dealing 1 damage to finishing off someone after inflicting tons and tons of effect damage on enemies, that Flashing Blade is something I will definitely use on my healers if there's a close counter weapon at some point for one of them, because then I can do 5 damage to them, no problem. You know, originally I summoned for Legendary Alm for that reason alone, because his stupid Luna arc can do true damage based on the 25% defense of the enemy unit. Now, the problem I soon discovered is that, it's only for initiation, so the man is all about initiating people. Alright, nothing I can really do about it. But I'm looking into other options, such as Flashing Blade, to perhaps make that work, because currently my healers do have this problem where, Cecilia's on the field, TA3, blah 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 blah. Oops, I don't do 1 damage, then I lose. Well, I do have some temporary solutions to deal with this, where I deal so much damage that I can do like 1 or 2 or something like that to finish off the Cecilia. But anyway, I digress. So Flashing Blade is one of these skills that is worth looking into. And I hope that when Heavy Blade comes out, they have something that will make it worthwhile as well. I would assume that it'll probably just check your attack and maybe just do 5 damage. Or it could be something really stupid like, oh, guarantees follow up if you have more attack. Like, it could happen. I can see that kind of crap happen. I mean, you've seen Sturdy Impact. That kind of crap is... Oh, man. And this is just book 3. Once this year passes and we go to book 4, what, I don't know what the hell we're gonna fight. We're already fighting death. What are we gonna fight next? God himself? But then gods are always dragons. Maybe something even beyond dragons, like... I can't even imagine it at this point. And we've always been just fighting some kind of dragon god in the background. They're evil. Oh yeah, blah 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 blah. We take them down with our falchion. Everything is okay again. I digress. I apologize. I tend to do this a lot when I am nervous because I'm doing this non-scripted, so I'm very very nervous right now. Anyway, so let's go and talk about finally the no follow-up with her. And of course, no follow-up, as you know, destroys the enemy if they try to go and slap on something stupid like a Worry Fighter to protect them. Now, that being said, as we said earlier, desperation would allow you to always, constantly attacking an enemy twice, but I kind of feel that gimmick to do this constantly. Having a trigger that is above a certain HP threshold, I think is a little bit more reliable, especially over 50%, which is a high amount. I think it's a bit more reliable if you have a healer around. Of course, if you don't, then you're kind of in the world of hurt, but if you do, then you can maintain your strength throughout, and you can use no follow-up, which is a lot safer than using dual desperation. I mean, it's really cute, it's a really good combo, but I suppose there is one thing you could do. Now, I suppose you could put a seal and use Brash Assault, in which case you can bypass Worry Fighter, unless they're putting up another layer, like, no, you can only do Worry Fighter, you can only Swordbreaker. I suppose if they're like Duma or something, and you're already hurt, and they also have Worry Fighter on top of that, then you have to break through 2 layers. But generally, I think having Braspiration would be enough for you to double people to death. So, in my analysis of this character, Marita is extremely powerful on the player phase, but much like Legendary Alm, she's got nothing if she gets attacked, and she will die quickly. Now, that is what you should take advantage of with this character. Luckily, for now, most characters generally specialize in one phase over the other. So, for now, Marita is the kind of character that you just need to make sure she doesn't walk up to your character and, well, beat him to death. You build up your defenses, and you take her out. That's pretty much all there is to it. Well, before we leave Marita today, I do want to say one more thing about the old Ayra situation. Now, Ayra is not as strong and as powerful in terms of player phase. However, she does have that stupid dual phase with that Recto Astra, which, fortunately, Marita does not have any of that. So, I do have to say, despite what I said about power creep and having tons of extra stats and being really, really fast and whatnot, this is a rather balanced character. So we have to be appreciative that we have something like that that is more focused on one stats, whereas Ayra kind of did dominate the meta for quite a little bit because of her crazy dual face Recto Astra nonsense that she uses with a slaying blade. Luckily for us, that's not the case here. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the next character. The pal of all pals. Hey cousin, let's go bowling! Our cousin Berkut himself! Now, Berkut is, fortunately, a decent cavalry now. I mean, his first form is alright, but cavalry these days are kind of underappreciated, shall we say. Now that we have beast units that comes by with their 3 movement speeds and they fly over everything to rip you to shreds, especially, oh my god, Hawk King and his pal, the Raven King, that goes ahead and just tears you to shreds with Gale Force, oh, not to mention with dancers that can also travel 3 spaces around the map to deal this kind of nonsense over and over again. When you look at cavalry, they seem so underwhelming. There's so many things that can trip them with that stupid ditch and, well, forest and such, that they're just not very good now. And that is the case with most cavalry these days. I feel kind of bad about them. Well, Berkut seeks to change this by just kind of having enough stats to tank and just not bother going out and do the whole Gale Force shenanigans, because that's not what he does with his pitiful 17 speed. But that's not a big deal at all. His 17 speed is actually a good thing, because now he has this wonderful Crimhold which helps preventing double attacks on him. Now, his defenses are 35-30. His resistance, for some reason, is a little bit less, but that's not a big deal at all, because he does come with Warding Stance 4, which is quite a powerful skill. Although I kind of prefer, to be perfectly honest with you, I kind of prefer the whole distant counter nonsense, but Berkut does have an advantage in that with 35 defense, along with other things, he can tank melee attacks just as well. So Berkut is actually a very balanced character when you think about it like that. Now, let's go and take a look at his Grimhild. I think that's how you pronounce it. But anyway, so if he gets attacked by range from bow, dagger, magic, or staff, or yada yada yada, 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 he can counterattack regardless of foe's range, and the foe cannot make a follow-up attack. So he does have a weakness to melee attack, but he hopes to rectify it by having enough defense to, well, take a hit, despite which could kill him. Now, most importantly, he has Warding Stance 4, which, while it doesn't do anything for melee, does, well, I suppose he does do something like dragons, does have the whole reduce special cooldown -1 on foe, which is very handy to have for most defenders. And this dude is all about, hey, you hit me, hit me. He loves getting hit. Sometimes he loves getting hit twice. It doesn't matter, because if a tank can negate special charges by 1, then chances are he is very likely to not die. Now, 35 these days isn't exactly like a massive amount of defense or anything, and Grimhild can be equipped to do more defense, but that's okay. That's what your teammate is there for. Then your teammates will help shore up your defenses further, and then soon you'll find Berkut going ding ding ding, and there's nothing you can do about him. So now let's go further into Grimhild, which allows you to not only do distant counter, but at a mere cost of 20 HP. Now, this is actually not even a cost to me. It's more like a bonus. It is a wonderful bonus. The whole reason why I want to summon for Lif, or if that's how you pronounce his name, at the end of this book 3 is so that I can use him to suck 30 HP from someone to boost his stats. Now, 30 HP is a very, very good amount for doing something below 50% health. 20, we're kind of skirting it a bit. You might be able to pull it off on dancers that have low BST and doesn't have enough HP. Say something like 40 or below 43 or something like that. Then you can get like an HP Bane. You don't merge this dancer, and you make sure that you get reduced to like 20 HP, and you can use Escape Route. And Escape Route dancer is extremely dangerous and unpredictable, so you have to be really, really careful about something like that. I am positive that people are going to use something like that in Aether raids. If you try to hit Berkut, that's what happens. But then again, I feel like with Aether raids, when in terms of defenses, you probably want to be a little more aggressive, because otherwise you end up getting baited. That's the main problem with Berkut. He does not handle that well. He's strictly enemy phase. He does not have any talents for player phase, unless you decide to give him Braspiration, but then you end up losing out on a few things. I suppose it's possible, though. Think about it like this. He does have guard already covered, so his B slot, what are you going to use it for? I suppose you could give him quick riposte to deal with melee if you really want to, but the man is mostly specialized in dealing with range units, so there are probably better candidates to take melee attacks. What he could do is give himself Braspiration, so that if he does get reduced below 50% HP himself, he can actually enter some player phase action himself and doubling people to death. Especially since if you look at his reprisal, he loves pain. The man loves pain a lot. So if you hurt him, he will hurt you back, and well, that's what we're gonna be doing with him. Well, as for warding stance itself as a father, though, I don't know, man. Resistance is okay. It's a good thing to have. I suppose if your character does carry Mystic Boost or something like that, for a ranged character anyway, that carry Mystic Boost, it could be very helpful for warding stance, but resistance, most enemy units tends to enjoy doing physical damage, and that's why most units tends to have more defenses than they have resistance, much like Berkut himself. Anyway, so Berkut is a little boring enemy phase compared to Marita's player phase, but there are ways you can adjust this for the moment. Hopefully there will be more seals in the future that gives them something more than Braspiration, but that's something you could go and consider for a bit instead of just focusing entirely on defense for him, which I think he has plenty of. Just having that warding stance 4 is more than enough for him to tank quite a number of situations. Now, you probably can't tank more than like 2 or 3 units if you start taking enough hits, but that's what healers are there for. Anyway, let's move on to the next unit, shall we? Before I digress a little longer than I need to be. So, our next hero is our pal who's kind of feeling kind of cold. Our pal Corrin with 173 BST. So, as I said earlier, Tier 2, my apologies, Season 2, or Book 2 armor units now has like 173 or something like that. Well, 174 or 175 if they get a super boon or something like that. We're looking at the same BST that Amelia had way back in the day, and now it's on an infantry unit. And not just that, a colorless infantry unit. This is obscene. And you have to look at the way that they spread the stats, though. They do try to balance it a little bit by kind of spreading it out as evenly as they could. But, there's only so much we could spread out at this point. 173 is a very hefty amount. A good amount of HP, good amount of attack, good amount of speed, 30, 27. Now, if you think about most units these days, even though despite ridiculous power creep, they did manage to keep some semblance of order by making sure that units don't go over 40 all that often, and generally you see units sit around the 20 to 40 range in terms of stats, so they keep that as a standard for the moment. Now, if they keep doing this and end up going to Book 4 with like stats that demands 40 or above, then we have a problem. Currently, this power creep is really bad, but it's something that you can still swallow. You can still kind of deal with, but I know there are a few people who invested quite heavily on the original female Corrin, the blue one with speed as her main asset, and 29 attack. Well, look at this crap. It makes you feel bad, doesn't it, when you invest in so much on a unit and they just kind of go on you. I mean, if you really like stupid Adrift Corrin, and you invested on that, and all of a sudden you're presented with this, that's also something that's kind of upsetting. That's the main problem that I have with power creep. Not because, oh yeah, one unit is obviously stronger than the other. Not simply because of that, but simply because that your progress cannot be carried over because they're counted as different characters. Now, if they have skins or something like that, oh, beautiful, great, then you can say, oh, I can carry this unit over. Say, for example, I know I'm digressing, I'm supposed to be analyzing this unit, but just hear me out. Say you have skins for Corrin, alright? You have 7 different skins because this is the 7th Corrin, right? Yeah. So you can switch between them, and your investments, such as, your stats and your skills and stuff like that, gets carried over. Then it feels like you're investing on the character itself. But the problem is that, well, the game's design doesn't do that very well. It's more of like a problem with the old game design that this thing has. This game is all about, plus 10ing a unit and then you're done. Then you realize that it doesn't work very well for future content, so you want people to keep summoning, Well, unfortunately, you're gonna have to let go of your plus 10 units, which is honestly very heartrending. You have to know how much money you spend on these things. That's for free-to-play users. I think that this game is very, very good. It's fair enough if you save your orbs. That is, anyway. Anybody can get a plus 10 unit as long as you save your orbs for a few months. Alright, now, unless you have really bad luck. You would have to spend more. But anyone can have a plus 10 unit, just like that. With the rate of this game as it is, they have to make money somehow. So, I mean, I understand power creep in this game. I understand, I don't say that it's completely wrong, but it's, well, it needs to be addressed better. Skins would be a good thing to have. Look, alright, we have to spend, like, extra money for it. Great, but, you know, like spending extra money to unlock the skin or upgrading my unit so that it has better art, for one thing. I mean, look at Lloyd. If you can upgrade his art, I'm sure a lot of Lloyd fans would do something like that. So, you know, something like that. Buying skins would be really nice. You can't just be like, oh yeah, you have to keep investing on a new plus 10 character each and every year. That's just not sustainable. That's the whole problem that this game have. It's not sustainable for people to keep spending money to plus 10 units. So I hope that, you know, they would do something like that down the line so that I can use my regular Corrin and upgrade it into this Corrin, for example, with 173 BST. Because this BST, although very high, is still in the more fair range. I am still kind of miffed about the fact that, you know, it's an infantry unit with these kinds of stats, but, well, what are you gonna do? Eventually, I guess, every other units are gonna get upgraded, except for cavalry, because look at cavalry here, look at Berkut, hey, I'm so happy, look at me! I only have 157 BST, but I'm still happy because I have the flaming torch as my wife. Flaming torch, the human torch as my wife. So there you have it, ha 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 ha! Well, hopefully cavalry will get a buff at some point. I feel like they may really get a little bit shafted ever since, well, the Reinhardt ruined everything, including them, for memes. But hey, at least now more people know about 776. Alright, I digress. Let's go and take a look at the skills for Corrin. So we have our Savage Breath. Ooh, so savage. It's like a solve X equation here as for Savage Breath. If you're not around your allies, you get, let's see, calculate X based on the calculator. You have 1 ally, plus 4, 2, 0 allies, 6 allies, 4, 2, and 0. So that's actually really easy to meet. In fact, alright, 0 allies may not be actually the most efficient amount. I would say 1 ally with a whole bunch of drive skills would be, or not just drive, spurs would probably be the best setup. 2 and above, I mean, you can still work with 2, so it's a pretty savage weapon. It is a very good weapon to have. It's despite the fact that it may seem like, oh yeah, you gotta be alone all the time. That's not it. Because this calculation is very lenient. So having 1 ally with plus 4 to all stats is actually not a big loss. You can just have someone do further modify your skills and you'll be fine. Like Corrin, for example. Like regular male Corrin with his Yato. That is someone you'd rather have on your team to stand next to you all the time to provide you much higher stat increases. So this leniency makes Savage Breath entirely too good, in my opinion. If it had been an or nothing kind of situation, I would say it's a little bit more balanced, but well, this one, I can't find any excuses for it being overpowered. It really is very strong. Luckily, it does not have distant counter built inside of it, because if it did, we'd be in trouble. But, I mean, on top of this, you also have an attack plus 3, so, I mean, working on this, you have to consider that her stats are kind of, well, already very high. It's just, I don't know what they're thinking. They just keep adding numbers on top of numbers instead of doing mechanics. Grimhild is very good on a mechanic standpoint. I like that. Savage Breath, nah, just stack a bunch of numbers on top of numbers. That's the one problem too they should probably address with this game. And numbers is a problem because when you're comparing like older units, say, well, we just have an upgrade for Faye, alright? We have an upgrade where she gets 4 to all stats if she gets attacked. That's great, but then you have to consider this. Considering the amount of stats that you have to a Book 3 character, I mean, she's also colorless as well, so consider that. Like, consider Duma, or even, I don't know, maybe like Grima or something like that. Maybe even Grima could produce more stats than an infantry archer. So while I do love Faye's refinement very much, numbers-wise, she just doesn't compete. It's the same thing if she were to compete to Halloween Jacobs. There's a bit of a problem with that. It's all numbers. You need more mechanics. Luckily, though, she does have a mechanic attached, and that is Quick Repulse in her weapon. Quick Repulse 4, to be exact. So luckily, she does have that. But if she doesn't have that, oh my god, dude, it just gets completely outplayed by characters such as Corrin, who just keep stacking stats. Anyway, enough complaining about stats. Let's go down and look at her skills. Attack speed solo. Oh yeah, let's keep going with the whole solo playthrough. No problem. Boring. More stats. Yup. That's the whole reason why people use A slots anyway, for stats. And that is why something like Flashing Blades upgrade was welcome, in my opinion. I feel like stuff like distant counter and like mechanics such as like Flashing Blade is much more interesting than stacking stats. But, well, shameful to admit, I do have a preference to these stats. Like Fury, I use on a lot of characters. There's so much more use to Fury than any other skills that I use. It's actually incredible. And I mean, attack speed solo does not provide visible stat increase, so there's a bit of a problem with that when it comes to, say, oh, I want to abuse attack opening. I want to abuse speed opening. Sometimes you might not be able to stack up enough stats to have it so that you affect your entire team with it. That kind of stuff. Anyway, now let's look at the Bee skill. Sudden Panic! Like sudden death, except you suddenly panic. It's basically a Versa Light. In my personal opinion, there's a lot of hype around the skill, but I don't really like it all that much because it's on a B slot. B slot is your mechanic slots. If A slots is about stats and certain other mechanics, B slot is all about mechanics. And you're using this one to turn your unit into a support unit. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about, oh, Arden would be great. Yeah, when you think about HP, you generally think about Arden. You generally think about Sephiel, but Arden makes Sephiel looks like a little baby with so much extra HP. Now, the problem with this is that Arden has a very good ring. This Ring of Pursuit gives him the ability to double both player and enemy face. It turns him into a scary, combative character. With Brave Sword or whatever weapon that he has, he can tear people to shreds. Now, if you were to suddenly slap Sudden Panic on the giant himself, well, that's great. You can panic a whole bunch of people. But what if they don't care? What if you need to use Arden to fight for whatever reason? We have a problem. Because Arden is effectively useless if he has this on his B slot. I suppose you could give him Quick Repulse to do enemy phase business, but I wouldn't do that. Especially not with a character who's carrying Sudden Panic. You want to keep his HP up as high as possible. And chances are even Arden with his ridiculous HP could still get chopped up. Especially nowadays. There's a lot of armor smashing going on around here because armor is just so prevalent these days. Now, I think that Sudden Panic is... there are units that specialize in support, like Christmas Eureka. That might be decent for her. But I don't know. I feel like if you're gonna do that, you should have a specialized character for this. Aversa is a specialized character for this. Not only can she fight because she has all her other slots intact, but she comes with a ton of HP. Now, there are characters that probably fit the bill to use Sudden Panic, but I just don't like it. It's just not very good because it occupies the B slot. Of course, if it occupies a C slot, then it is a really powerful skill. It might be a little overpowered. Think about it like this, in terms of like Chilling Seal for Gunthar, except Gunthar can actually put it to use. There's currently only a few units that could put stat debuffs, or skill, not stat debuffs, like just general debuffs to use. Like Yoon, for example. Yoon could probably do that, but Yoon has her own ways to debuff an enemy unit. Okay, alright, how about Duma? Duma might be able to do this decently, because Duma does have a weapon that allows him to was it preventing doubles or doubling others? Either way, as long as they're hurt, and they can do that. So, being that Duma, when he spawns on the field, he does 7 damage. As long as it's not healed, he can most likely encounter someone that doesn't have 100% HP and deal with them appropriately. Especially if he were to carry distant counter or like quick repulse or something like that, then, you know, he can actually take a hit. Whereas Arden, we're kind of like, what are you going to do with Arden afterwards? That's the problem. At least Duma can still fight, and he can fight well. Arden is... I don't know. I really think he'll just be like an HP tank sitting around all day doing nothing. Now, Panic Ploy was interesting for a while. Now, if it was something like Panic Ploy Plus with like 3 columns, that could be kind of scary. But then again, it might be a little too well. So, Sudden Panic, I think, is a very balanced skill, but I just don't find a use for it right now. I certainly wouldn't use it on this Corrin. This Corrin is... Well, I guess I kind of understand why they would set up Corrin with this skill, because this Corrin has stats all over the place. So she doesn't need to care about mechanics, just need to care about beating the crap out of someone. It's kind of like Takamura, now that I think about it, if anybody reads Hajime no Ippo. I don't think Takamura has many fancy attacks. He's just really strong. He's just strong across the board. Whereas you see like guys like Ippo or something like that, they have like, their Dempsey roll, their Gazelle punch and stuff like that. And stupid Takamura doesn't have a special technique. He just kind of punch people and they die. That's what I think Corrin is about. Just having good, strong overall stats, but no fancy gimmick except for this Sudden Panic now, I guess. This little thing would allow Corrin to just kind of go without a B slot. But I still feel that with a more specialized B slot, she can go even further with her ridiculous stats. Alright, now let's move on to the final unit of this banner. We'll also talk about Delthea, but let's talk about the final unit of this banner real quick. Ow. Homeless Tiki! Now let me just adjust this because I am really bad at doing this. Oops, I'm moving myself. Let me move. Whoop. It's really archaic. I apologize. But I really don't feel like making a full video for it like I normally do. I don't have enough. I'd rather just sit and talk about this without any scripts or anything like that and enjoy myself. I would much prefer having Berk around to help me out, but, well, situation is as it is. He's old and he's busy, and so am I. Now, let's go and talk about Homeless Tiki, except Stinky. So this is what happens if Homeless Tiki stays outside for too long. And Homeless, she gets very, very stinky. You see all this purple stinky air emitting from her? She's very, very stinky from not having showered or bathed in like a month. So my call sign for her is Stinky Tiki, or just Stinky for short. Now Stinky here is a stat stick, much like her pal Corrin. And, well, being an armored with tons and tons of speed opens up to special fighter shenanigans, which is just straight up unfair sometimes. But I feel like, as I've said before, there is a balance within these stats in that they don't go too overboard with like 40 to everything. and just kind of like mid high 30s, and then you have a high 20s stats and below. This is currently the highest stats in the game, so as long as that stays, we should be okay. I'm sure that by book 4, we're going to probably see something like 40 to all stats, but right now I feel like Homeless Tiki is fair, and I apologize, Stinky is fair, so I don't have as much of bad feelings as other people would with regards to her. Now, I think that this also makes her a little bit more boring, because she's kind of like, in my opinion, more inferior compared to the legendary one, which actually provides blessings on top of these buffs, on top of these stats. Now, in terms of mechanics, what do we have here? Raising breath. Oh, looky here. You can distant counter. Great. Well, that's just like legendary Tiki. Homeless Tiki can do the same thing. Well, now you're Stinky and you do the same thing, and so boring. This is a very boring character. I apologize. I almost fell asleep with this one. I almost didn't want to do this banner because the other units besides Berkut are kind of like, even Marita, whom I have praised before, kind of like, bland, boring. Puts me to sleep. I'm so glad that Berkut, not only is he voiced by a very talented voice actor, but is also very fun to use. Well, in terms of enemy phase anyway. But the fact that he minus 20 HP and allows you to do all kinds of shenanigans is more important than say, oh, I'm Corrin, I like to sit alone. Oh, I'm Stinky Tiki, I like the distant counter. Great, well, Hector's been doing that for years. What are you gonna do? Well, I guess you have more stats, you can actually take a hit, whereas nowadays, regular Hector will have a very bad time taking hits, and he'll probably pass away to the next realm from any magic attacks, which is kind of defeating the purpose of distant counter in the first place. You know, I really regret summoning all those Hectors back then and merging him. He served me nicely, but now I want to use a surgical knife and split him back into 11 pieces so that I can give his distant counter to my other units. And that, my friend, is the regret of someone who invested on a unit too heavily in like the beginning of the game, and power creep just kind of crushes you. Well, that's why I can't rightly spend too much money on this game anymore. If I were to spend money again, I cannot imagine myself spending too much, because there's just no security. Your investment just kind of goes bloop. Whereas, say, in like, I know, bring other games as example, but in like Dragalia Lost, you can just use 3-star units and you can still use them to beat any maps. It's a game where you just kind of invest on your waifu and call it a day. They even buff 3-star units, okay? That's absolutely insane. There's just so many quality of life improvement for that game that I find myself more willing to invest on that game than I am here, because I am not sure if these things that are good now will remain good later. And that's especially true for Tiki, because Tiki is reliant on her stats. Stats is very fickle. Mechanics, okay, alright. We can let's go back to that Hector we talked about. At least Hector does have his Omni Breaker nonsense, thanks to using his using Quick Repose with his Armads and Worry Fighter. That way he can actually make sure that he only takes 1 hit while unleashing 2 back to the enemy. That's something that's unique to him, that he still has to give himself an edge. So he's not completely out of the game yet, but, well, in terms of stats, he is a little bit inferior. It's unfortunate, but he's not out of the game yet. Now, Tiki, on the other hand, what does Tiki have? Stats, a DC weapon. Well, DC weapon does have advantages, as we talked about earlier with that flashing blade. Now, I don't know if I would use that when there's special fighter, and besides, I don't think she can even use it. Flashing blades for infantry only. It could be also for armor, but when you have special fighter, you don't really need something like that. Special Fighter is just a straight out unfair technique. You negate enemy charges while increasing your own. It's so unfair. So a fast armor using Special Fighter is a very horrifying thing indeed. Now, that being said, Tiki is completely reliant on her stats. I wouldn't also use Brazen attack speed. Brazen attack speed doesn't really fit her all that well. I would use something else for her. Brazen and Special Fighter kind of conflicts. I mean, if you want to activate Brazen and you want to use Special Fighter, you have a smaller gap of between 80 to 50% HP to take advantage of this. So I would honestly use another skill, Sturdy Impact, or maybe something dual face. Fury. Let's just give her Fury. Let's just give her Fury 4. You never go wrong with Fury 4. I mean, if you're gonna be a stat stick anyway, why not go all the way? But anyway, let's go and talk about Solitary Dream, shall we? Solitary Dream at the start of each turn. Unit is adjacent to only dragon allies, and if unit is not adjacent to any ally, or if you're not adjacent to any allies, grant attack speed, dead, reservoir, you need to remember. So basically, I'm racist Tiki. Ever since I've been homeless, I've developed racist ideals, and now I hate humans. And beasts. And beasts too, because you know, they're stinky. Like me. Now, attack speed, def, res, +4 is basic. It's a very basic amount of stat increase. Nowadays, when it comes to visible stats, you probably want to strive to get yourself 5, 6, 7, or something like that. 4 is a bit meh, since you can get that easily, but I suppose you do have the ability to fight well if you get isolated for whatever reason. Isolation and being by yourself seems to be the theme of this banner. Well, except for Berkut, who loves being near someone so they can sacrifice them and turn them into the Human Torch. But otherwise, being by yourself seems to be the common theme going on here. The most important thing about Solitary Dream is that you can move one extra space all by yourself. Now, generally, when we fight armors in Arena or in Aether Raids, we're looking for abilities, we're looking for chances to hamstring them, so they're stuck moving one space per movement. That is the most important weakness that an armor has, and that is something that we tend to take advantage of. So we look for a character with Armor March or something like that, and we take them out. But the problem here is, or with that stupid Sea of Armored Boots, and we hit them, either with the Savage Vantage or just simply having Doom on the field or something like that, just do a little bit of damage, and then they're also crippled. But, well, there's no such thing. Oh, well, looks like my face is broken. But anyway, there's no such thing like that for this character. This character cannot be hamstrung as long as she's alone. And since she has such massive stats, I suppose the 4 to all stats is still kind of relevant, especially if you're not near anyone. There's no one to give you tactics. So this unit, I think, would be great as like a final boss character in Aether Raids that you just kind of stash in a corner, or just, you know, just a unit that sits in the back or something and just kind of, you know, I actually think that this Tiki might use Sudden Panic better than the others. Now that I think about it, she does have so much extra stats. Special Fighter is unfair as hell, but if you were to not care about charges, you could, well, use her as a final character that just kind of sits around the back spreading evil debuffs and panic on the enemy and such like that. And then when they finally do get to her, they find that they can't defeat her, and then they lose. 7 turns is all you get for Aether Raids. So if you finally find yourself fighting against Tiki and you can't bring her down, you've got a problem. But I still kind of think that Sudden Panic is crap, honestly. I don't like it. The fact that they have to be adjacent to another unit, well, adjacency is a thing, but most people tend to be 2 spaces away from their units. It's not that hard to set up a formation like that. Whereas adjacent, I mean, there are times when your units have no choice but to stick next to each other, but I don't know. I feel like it's kind of easy to avoid for the price you pay for one of your character. I don't know. I still feel that Aversa being the full package with in terms of this kind of nonsense is better. Now, if you were to say Sudden Panic can do something where, like, you affect someone from 2 spaces away, now that, my friend, we're in business. Of course, that'll be also very overpowered, and I wouldn't do something like that either, but let's just put it like that. If there's a Versa using that as well, then you're gonna be suffering a lot of panic. But then again, you know, when I talk about this before with panic, if your character has in-combat buffs, then, well, panic would not really work well on you. Now, there's also a problem with Solitary Dream itself. It's that it gives you visible stat increases just by yourself. Now, there's a problem with visible stats is that once you get panicked from, I don't know, either all the way across the map or some stupid reason, then you're actually in a world of hurt. For someone like Tiki, who relies on stats, not having those stats means, well, pain and destruction. Panic is strong because it targets visible stats, but if you have a unit that, well, is all about invisible stats, in-combat buffs, something like that, then panic is, well, kind of useless. There's a lot of units that I currently use that uses drive and, like, gold or ward or something stupid like that. People ask me, oh, how is it that latches can double someone to death? Well, guess what? I have stupid blessings. And I have drive on like 2 other characters. Why do you think that latches all of a sudden can latch onto your character and attacks twice? Which is also very scary, by the way. Latches has like a base of 25 speed, and here she is doubling on other people. So stats can be manipulated. I mean, I can understand why they would try to power creep, but honestly, I feel like they should just focus on mechanics rather than stats, because stats can still be very easily manipulated in this game. So, again, you see latches is doubling you, you know that there's problems in this world, and that is indeed what it is. Anyway, I'm supposed to be talking about Solitary Dream, and Solitary Dream can also be a weakness if homeless stinky Tiki were to get panicked. So there's that. Anyway, let me go and talk about one last thing before we go. We're going to talk a little tiny bit about our pal Delthea, Vampire Delthea, who's turned Majin. We will now give her a new name, christen Majin Delthea. Alright, I'll move this a little bit. See, look, nice. Wonderful mansion in the back, too. Well, so Majin Delthea, if those of you who have seen the data mine, you know that she has 4 to all stats for free as in-combat, which is invaluable, as we've just said, as in-combat stats that she can have. Basically Fury 4, except, well, she only loses 4 HP. Now 4, if, I don't know, Japanese people follow the same superstition. I don't know if Japanese follow the same superstitions as Chinese, where, 4 is the number of death. They might. And I think that's the whole reason why they did all these 4s for death for Delthea. Now, 4 to all stats is kind of scary. Considering her base stats, 36, you plus 4 to that, she has a base attack of 40. It's kind of scary. Now, this is stat increase that is done, well, pretty well. I actually really like this Delthea, but I also kind of think that she's boring as hell. Stats increases, yeah, I much prefer beautiful mechanics that'll make me think for a bit. I mean, there's one thing that I do appreciate about those stupid beast units, and that's the fact that they have terrible mechanics that'll ruin your day. I kind of like Mordecai a lot. I like the way he just tosses people around and messes with their stats. I thought that's kind of cool. I like the way that that fucking Tiburn can fly across the map and rip you to shreds. I find that kind of cool, even if it's very annoying. Delthea is, well, a bunch of stats. Though these bunch of stats is not to be underestimated, because 40 attack on a free unit with no IV changes, no assets and flaws is very scary. I'm very scared of her, and I can't wait to fully invest on it. Her speed as well increases to 40 to 37. Her defense normally is her Achilles heel. I mean, we all know about the 5 defense Delthea. Well, now she has 23. And if you were to give her Fury 4 or something like that, she has 27. Hey, what the hell is this? She's bulky as hell. That's the kind of crap I kind of like to do with Delthea, because she needs that defense quite a bit. Now, I suppose Sturdy Impact does exist, but Sturdy Impact is, well, more for initiating. If you were to get attacked for some reason, well, you want to surprise someone by not dying. Delthea can do this. That is the reason why I find this character to be kind of scary. It's boring as hell, but it is effective as hell. Now, I'm gonna spoil a little bit because I made a Delthea video quite a bit ago, and I actually much prefer the normal one, to be honest with you. She's far more interesting with her dark aura, which I will introduce when I make that video later. I actually finished making the video like months ago, but I haven't actually put it together. As you can see why, this video is late already. I don't have that much time on my hands, but when I do, I like to sit down and make videos like these where I talk a little bit about the game. I find that interesting. I just wish I had more time in my hands. But anyway, she's kind of boring, yes, but there might be some beast skills and some seal skills that we can get later on down the line to take advantage of and make her into a far more terrifying character than she needs to be. In fact, she might even be able to use close counter well, just because of the sheer fact that she gets 4 to all stats on top of her things, so she doesn't have to rely on her A slots all that much. That's the kind of stuff I did for Dark Emperor Nino. Dark Emperor Nino has Owl Tome, and Owl Tome, well, as we all know, is basically 6 to all stats for funsies. So, well, that's what we do with Delthea as well. And Delthea actually has a very healthy amount of BST as well. I think she has like 157 or 153. I actually didn't calculate properly, but, well, she has a lot of stats. So, while it's boring, it is a good step up for mages to also have that kind of stats, and it's kind of interesting to see Delthea, of all people, to take a physical attack and just be like, and then she rips you to shreds. That's what she is. She's a goddamn zombie, and zombies that don't take pain, and unless you blow her head off, she will continue to come at you and spit death all over your face. Otherwise, though, I don't think she has many other capabilities that are worth mentioning. I will probably cover a video of her once I fight her and obtain her, but until then, that's about it for Delthea. Now, I suppose let's go and just talk briefly about the Weapon Refinery that we just recently got. Let me just... quick. Where is it? This... Alright, so the Weapon Refinery. Back like this. Oh yeah, there we go. Honestly, I feel like it's a waste of time for me talking about it because it's very straightforward. Ball of Diffusion, as I've mentioned earlier, is 4 to all stats, and you get Quick Repulse. The horrible, evil Faye now is pretty much locked in on her enemy phase duties. I know her stat line is not meant for player phase, but I honestly was hoping for something a little less meta, shall we say. Because the problem with Faye, I think, is that, well, her stats just tire down to that one roll. I feel like if she could actually do, like, player phase or something like that, it could be interesting. Or, you know, more ways to deal damage outside of physical damage, like Poison Sting, like I did before with my Fire Sweep Bow. Okay, imagine, like, if her Refine is, like, a super powerful Fire Sweep Bow that allows her to attack someone and inflict a ton of effect damage to units 2 spaces away and to the target itself. Like, say, a Poison Sting of 20 damage. Now, that's kind of scary, of course. That would be also kind of weird. She can't really follow up on it unless she has allies that can work together with her to take advantage of that 20 HP loss. And besides, there are units who become much stronger if they were to lose HP, like Perry, for example. I mean, you know, I kind of want to pair Perry with, like, Berkut, because I was talking about the Sealed Falchion as well, and, well, Berkut, and Purry is actually something that gets kind of strong if she gets HP reduced. But unfortunately, it's also just stats, and stats is on a cavalry is kind of crappy, so maybe not. But anyway, I digress. So stats increase for Faye is. As most of you know, we already have Halloween Jacob, who has a ton of stats, but Faye is, well, much better looking and has a quick repulse building to that weapon. But our pal Jacob does have wonderful abilities of using Bold Fighter or like Vengeful Fighter. That and quick repulse on his seal, and he still has more than enough stats on his native person to initiate dual face nonsense and still kind of overcome Faye. But Faye does have advantages as well. Now Faye, if she were to use, let's see, I think the most ideal setup would be to give her Distant Defense 4 to get that null range, and then use her B slot to give her guard or something. That would be her best build, in my opinion. Yeah, that would be the best build. That Jacob cannot emulate because he has to use his B slot for something. I mean, I suppose he could use quick repose as a seal and then use guard on his B slot. I suppose he can emulate it like that, but Faye has a little bit more freedom, but she does have, well, less stats compared to Jacob and can move. She can move further, but Jacob is just, it just feels a lot more superior, especially since when you use guard bow, you can give yourself yet more HP and more defenses. So, Bow of Devotion is very good. Again, don't get me wrong, I think it's the best refinement in this entire series, but unfortunately, it's just so boring. I wish that it has something that, well, make Faye does something that is unexpected. That way, we have her normal guard bolts nonsense, and then we have the stupid bee that stings you in your player phase nonsense. Well, I probably will still use her Bow of Devotion and make a video out of it. This wouldn't be as interesting as if I were to somehow make her do player phase shenanigans that ruin people's days. But, well, that's just how it is. Speaking of day, let's talk about Daybreak Lands. Oh, what about that Shiro? His Japanese name is also Daybreak, by the way, from what I understand. Not only is his land stolen, but his name is stolen as well by the evil Lucas. And unfortunately, though, this Lance is boring. Stat increase, yeah, when you initiate attack, and you have special trigger. Dauntless Lance is better than this thing. So, Daybreak Lance is, well, taking full advantage of Lucas's attack and defense, true, but it's just not that interesting. It's just a slaying lance with extra stats. Unfortunate, but, well, what can you do? That's the problem with Weapon Refineries. There are some units that really benefit from it and gave them unique advantages, such as Seleth, for example. Seleth has really good mechanics that was given to him to his turfing. Now that is cool. Or the White Wings, for example, it gives them brave weapons that they can have as long as they hang out around 2 flyers. That is really cool. Then we have things like Panther Sword and Bow Spear that not only are they gem weapons. Now gem weapons are good in that they counter their colors quite well, but the problem with gem weapons is that, well, they're not good for general use, and if you get caught with the wrong color, you're the one who has to suffer the pain. And the problem is that Sully and Stahl have to put up with that their weapons is not for initiating. Their weapon is for enemies to initiate on you, which brave enemy face weapon is interesting. They could, say, give themselves distant counter or advantage or something like that, and then they'll slap the enemy to death. But the problem is that their main stat is terrible. Their general stats are both terrible. They're both Cavalier, first of all, so they're really losing out in stats. And second, look at this crap. They have to have a weapon triangle advantage to tear someone to shreds. So they can be abused in a way that they can't use Savage Vantage well enough to actually break someone to pieces. If they didn't have Triangle Adept as their main stat, and instead it's their secondary one, then I think their Panther Sword and Bow Spear would be much more worthwhile. Then I would swap the TA nonsense for stats like I did with Alphonse. See, if Alphonse had Triangle Adept as his main skill on his Volt Hanger, then he's screwed. He would have been the worst unit in the entire game forever. Luckily for us, he gets triple brazen instead, so we should thank God for something like that instead of getting tied down to TA. That's the main problem those two suffer, and I feel bad because Toilet Bowl and Stahl, I think Stahl also wears a toilet. Anyway, they're both kind of forgettable characters. I mean, no, not forgettable. Unlike our pal, what is his name? Oh my god, dude, he disappears all the time. I can't even remember his name. I think he starts with a K. A C. Column. Joking. Anyway, so they're not that forgettable, but they're kind of, I don't know, they're just so secondary. They're just so, what is the word? Territory. 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 I'm sorry. I'm Chinese. I can't pronounce English words sometimes. But anyway, I wasted enough time about blathering about nonsense. I hope that you all enjoy this little chat that we have in terms of the recent Darkness Within. Oh, banner. I hope that this will help make your decision on whether you should summon. You shouldn't. It's a 4-person banner. It's terrible. Wait till they get on Legendary or something. Or Hero Fest. Don't summon now. But if you say, I really like Berkut or something like that, well, you could summon. I think Berkut is the best unit in the banner, to be perfectly honest with you. He might be just an enemy-faced Cavalier with less stats, but he is unique. Has fun mechanics. I think I like him the most in the whole banner. The others are stat sticks that could expire at some point, but you'll probably at least you will put them to use for a year or two until something really broken comes by. I think they still have their mechanics that they can. Anyway, I think I've spent enough time blathering, so I thank you all for watching. Until next time.